Have you ever really stopped and thought, where do a country's laws actually come from? I mean, it's not like they just appear out of nowhere. It's kind of like a country's DNA, right? A super complex code that's been written and rewritten over centuries. Well, in this explainer, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to decode the legal DNA of Sierra Leone, and trust me, what we find is this incredible mix of history, tradition, and modern-day rules.
So, where do the laws come from? You'd think that'd be a simple question, wouldn't you? But the answer, well, it's almost never that easy. And when it comes to Sierra Leone, it's this really unique blend of different sources. You've got laws written down just a few decades ago, but you've also got rules that stretch way, way back through centuries of tradition.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. We're going to trace all these different sources right back to where they came from. First up, we'll look at the ultimate rulebook, the big one, the Constitution. It's kind of like the key to the whole map. Then, we'll dive into the laws that are actually made in Sierra Leone. And after that, we'll explore this whole other category, the laws that were inherited from the past.
All right, let's kick things off with that ultimate rulebook. See, every single legal system on the planet needs a foundation, right? A single source of truth that everything else has to line up with. And for Sierra Leone, that rock-solid foundation is its constitution.
And you know what's really interesting? The Constitution itself tells you this, plain and simple. If you look right in Section 170, the very first thing it lists as a source of law is, well, itself. Lawyers have a fancy term for this. They call it the ground norm. But really, it just means it's the ultimate source of all legal power. If there's ever a disagreement or a conflict between laws, the Constitution always gets the final word.
But the Constitution doesn't just stop there and say, hey, I'm the boss. Nope. It actually lays out the entire recipe for the country's laws. It's like a table of contents. So after listing itself, it points to 4 other sources. You've got laws made by Parliament, then you have all sorts of orders, rules, and regulations. Then there's this interesting one called the existing law, and finally, the common law. These 5 things right here, that's the official legal DNA we were talking about.
Okay, so let's dig into those next 2 sources on the list. These are all about the laws and rules that are actively being created inside Sierra Leone right now.
And man, this is where the history really starts to jump out. It turns out not all written laws are the same. Check out this table. You've got your modern municipal laws, right? The ones passed by Sierra Leone's own legislature. But then, look at this. The legal system also has received English laws. These are old laws from before 1880 that just became part of the system automatically during the colonial era. And then there's a third type, adopted laws, which are English laws from after 1880 that the Parliament specifically chose to hang on to. It's a pretty fascinating legal family tree, isn't it?
So that third source from the Constitution covers a whole bunch of other official rules. And we're not just talking about the big capital L laws that come from Parliament. This is everything else. It's the rules that tell courts how to operate, the high court rules. It's the emergency regulations you might see during a state of emergency. And it even includes presidential executive orders, things you might actually hear about, like orders on exporting timber, or even that monthly National Cleaning Day.
Okay, now here's a distinction that might seem a bit nerdy, but it's actually really, really important. It all comes down to where the power to make a rule comes from. So, if the power comes directly from the Constitution itself, that's what you call a constitutional instrument. But if the power comes from a specific act of Parliament, then it's a statutory instrument. It's a subtle difference for sure, but it's crucial for understanding the whole pecking order of the legal system.
All right, so we've talked about laws being made today. Now let's get into the other side of the family tree, the inherited laws. These are the ones that come from history and tradition, not from a modern parliament.
So what about this thing called existing law? The best way to think about it is like a legal snapshot in time. Imagine the day before the 1991 Constitution officially came into force. The Constitution didn't just show up and erase everything that came before it. That would have been chaos. Instead, it basically said, hey, all the written and unwritten laws that were valid yesterday, they're still good today. It was a really smart way to make sure there was no legal black hole and everything could transition smoothly.
And that brings us to the 5th and final source mentioned in the Constitution, the common law. But here's the trick. It's not just one single thing. It's more like a bundle, a 3-for-1 deal. It includes what we think of as English common law. That's law built up over centuries from judges' decisions. It also includes something called doctrines of equity, which are all about fairness. And, super importantly, it includes the rules of customary law.
So we just mentioned customary law. What exactly is that? Well, it's pretty much what it sounds like. These are the rules of law that grew naturally or organically over a long time within specific communities all over Sierra Leone. You won't find these written down in some giant law book in the capital. Instead, they are the accepted traditions and legal customs of particular communities, and the state actually recognizes them as a formal, valid source of law.
Okay, so we've gone through those 5 official sources that are listed right in the Constitution. But you know what? To make it a little easier to grasp, we can actually group all of that into 4 main categories, or pillars. This is a great way to really get the big picture. That's right. All that complexity, all that history, it really all boils down to just this one number. 4. 4 main sources. So let's put it all together.
And here they are, the 4 big ones. First, you've got statute law. That's the bucket that holds all the acts of Parliament and all those rules and regulations we talked about. Second, you have customary law, those traditional, community-based rules. And finally, you have the 2 big inherited traditions from England, common law, which is the law made by judges over time, and the doctrines of equity, which are all about basic fairness. See, those 4 categories neatly wrap up everything we've talked about.
So when you step back and look at the whole picture, Sierra Leone's legal system is this rich, complex tapestry. It's woven together from so many different threads, right? You've got the modern laws of a democracy, you've got this significant colonial inheritance from England, and you have these incredibly deep-rooted local customs. And that, well, it leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. How does a blend of modern, colonial, and customary laws actually come together to shape a nation's identity?